Do you enjoy high-stakes scenarios? Do you enjoy the thrill of being subject to the whims of fate, as it brings you staggering highs and devastating lows? And most importantly, can you take the heat as the stakes grow even higher? If so, then take the plunge and risk it all in a game that acts as a gateway to its hundreds of thousands of players into an extreme addiction. A game that, according to the ratings board that reviewed it, could be banned across multiple countries. A game that is truly so sinister that it would masquerade as a simple card game marketed for children in order to lure them into the devil's favorite pastime. Not fiddling. Gambling. But is it true? Is this simple card game with soothing music actually a gateway to living the true Kaiji experience? Well, this may shock some of you, but the truth is no, not even remotely close. In reality, it's a roguelike deck builder about beating a score threshold, but that doesn't mean it's immune to ruining your life via addiction. To be honest, it's the best roguelike game I've played since the original Binding of Isaac, a game which even on my elite PC Master Race setup wirelessly connected to my RGB chair for maximum gaming efficiency, still fails to get above 15 FPS and turns my PC into a homebrew space heater. A game that, despite these shortcomings, is one of the few games I have managed to sink almost 1,000 hours into across its different iterations. Additionally, unlike other deck-based games on the market, it doesn't add any form of RPG elements or drapings, and instead trusts in the time-tested 52-card playing deck, making it simple enough for even a 5-year-old to pick up. In short, it's the only deck-based roguelike you'll ever need. The gameplay of Balatro is based off poker, and as a result, is very simple, but I'll give a basic explanation regardless for those who are either unenlightened, oppressed, or Amish. Don't think I don't see you, Abram. Your goal is to create any of these poker hands in order to beat an ever-increasing score threshold. Most of these are fairly self-explanatory, but for the higher scoring cards, a flush is 5 cards of the same suit, a full house is a 3 of a kind and a pair in one hand, a straight is 5 cards with a sequence such as 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a straight flush is a straight and a flush in the same hand. There are others, but we'll save them for later. Each hand has a score and multiplier according to its difficulty to play. Generally though, you'll stick to one hand type per run, since usually only 1 or 2 types are viable based on the jokers you have. For context, jokers are essentially upgrade cards that give different effects based on how you play, and are the difference between struggling to make ends meet and burning down the score counter. Most decks only allow 5 slots, so you have to be particular with what you want for a build if you want to start burning down the house. Thankfully, they can be sold when better options come along, allowing a Joker build to easily be swapped for another. Joker bonuses can range anywhere from almost unusable to unsellable based on the cards in your deck and how you've rigged it. This is where things get complicated. While jokers are what mainly affects your score and ultimately what will determine if you win or lose a run, everything else affects what jokers and hands are viable for you. You see, unlike regular playing card games where tampering with cards will at best get you booted from the game and at worst land you in a roadside meeting with the local crime syndicate, Balatro actively encourages you to modify your deck by drawing on them with Sharpies, laminating them, stamping them, or even adding a few duplicates of your favorite to sway the odds in your favor. These are done through booster packs which can do everything from giving you a random card to duplicating a joker. They come in 5 flavors and can also be used to level up hands for better scores and multipliers. Lastly, to top this creme brulee of card conversion are vouchers, which can be bought to give massive bonuses and influence the types of cards that appear. It's all far too nuanced to go over in detail, but all you need to know is that all these deck modifications are what changes a run from being good to causing integer overflows. Now that the overall basics of gameplay are out of the way, how do you actually win a run? Well, there's a little known secret in the community that most people would rather not admit. The easiest build you can go for to win a run 9 times out of 10 is a flush build. Now of course, the top of the bell curve individuals will tell you that flush builds are basic, boring, and repetitive. But that doesn't change the fact that if you want to win consistently, you're probably going to be playing a lot of flushes. Listen, it's not my fault that flushes score well and are easy to make. All I did was notice that there are a disproportionate number of jokers that get bonuses for having a certain suit, and that half the cards in booster packs can be used to easily build flush decks. Of course, if you're going for game-breaking scores in endless mode, this doesn't work, but if all you want to do is pass the finish line, your hand-played stats are probably going to look a lot like this. Now, if you want my honest opinion, use flushes to unlock as much as you can, and once you've done that, try out some of the other hands and builds to see how they work. You'll have a lot more fun with all the options available. Speaking of options, once you start winning runs, you'll also start unlocking new decks to break the game with. There's 15 decks total, and they range anywhere from milquetoast to mind-altering. I could just list how each one works, but instead, how about I tell you some stories about some of the builds I did with each deck, starting with the Magic Deck, a card set that is actually pretty normal, but it provides you with an extra consumable slot and 2 full cards. The extra slot itself is almost never useful unless you have the right build. However, it gets you one step closer to the Omen Globe voucher that can make special cards appear in any booster pack. This upgrade is also usually not that useful, but when it works in your favor, it can easily break the game. This run I did is a prime example of how I chose to completely ignore all of that and still break the game. I had bought the Omen Globe, of course, since that is the main draw of the deck. However, all of my Spectral cards were utterly useless, so instead, I decided to grab the bull by the horns and exploited the stock market to build up a nest egg I could use as a money tree for my future financial gains. In other words, I made a shit ton of cash and turned the deck into a money build built around the bull joker, which increases the amount of chips a hand gets based on how much cash you have stored up. By the end, the chips fell like water from a fountain, and even outclassed my multiplier, but this bull run had to end eventually. The chips weren't enough, and sadly, I lost to a blind I would have easily beaten earlier. My investment manager, Ancient Joker, was a bit of a loose cannon and would choose a random suit to multiply every round. He went all in on hearts, even though my deck was almost entirely made up of spades. And the conflict in interest led to a total market collapse. While veterans may scoff and say that a chip build was never sustainable, I know the true fault of my deck lied in the fact that Ancient Joker is a greedy rat bastard who is less helpful than a broken clock. Our next deck on the list is for those out there who want a free and easy win every run. The Checkered Deck is the most boring deck you can play. Remember before how I said flushes are the most viable hand to play? Well, the Checkered Deck makes it even easier by removing clubs and diamonds from the deck, giving you only 2 suits to deal with. Listen, there's no way around it. This deck is by far the simplest to deal with. It is the deck equivalent of Kirby's Epic Yarn, a game that quite literally has no game over. Every single difficulty level for this deck is a cakewalk, except for the last. This is the only deck I have unlocked gold stake difficulty on so far, and despite being the deck equivalent of a daycare center, I struggled on gold stake. The way that difficulty works with Balatro is that each time you beat the highest unlocked difficulty for a deck, the stake level for it increases and adds additional modifiers that need to be dealt with 8 levels total. However, gold is especially hard to deal with, -1 hand size. What does this mean? It means that instead of holding 8 cards in your hand, you can only hold 7. Sounds incredibly simple, right? -1 hand size makes it significantly harder to form 5-card hands, which includes every single type of flush. Suddenly, the Checkered Deck goes from extremely easy to brutally hard. While every previous difficulty was a gentle breeze, gold stake is a typhoon. Suddenly, every modifier you hadn't struggled with before has come back for revenge after you completely ignored them on previous runs. It's the equivalent of rolling your grandma through the park only for the local pit mom to release her pack of friendly, gentle, child-loving pit bulls off the leash so they can greet the 2 of you with a big kiss. I loved the difficulty swap and struggled over and over, even getting close a couple of times. But sadly, I had failed. Maybe I just wasn't cut out for gold stake. After hours of trying, I finally gave up. Dejected and defeated by what should have been the easiest deck, I decided to stop playing Balatro. Then I came back a week later and one-shot it off camera like it was nothing. Slight update, while editing this video, it appears that the last 2 stake difficulties were changed to have different types of jokers appear on the shop instead. The good news is that these are far more interesting to play with than prices on boosters increasing forever and having 1 less card in hand. The downside is that Checkered Deck is now piss easy on every difficulty. This next deck is a personal favorite of mine. The Erratic Deck is for players who want a true roguelike experience out of their deck. For the madmen who believe in true randomness, and for all the real gamblers who believe in high risk, high reward stakes. All ranks and suits in deck are randomized. In other words, you can either start with the worst deck imaginable or 10 Queen of Hearts. Remember at the start how I had mentioned there are other high-scoring hands? Well, there are 2 hands that surpass all others in terms of scoring. 5 of a kind and flush 5. Hands both unheard of and forbidden in the grand halls of Vegas. And due to the way the Erratic Deck works, suddenly you're starting with a deck that's a gambler's wet dream. The only problem being that there is no guarantee the jokers you will find will play into whatever number is on your pre-built flush 5 deck. But when it works... The hand you just saw me play was the culmination of about 15 failed runs in a row and a massive bet on pure RNG. Remember before how I mentioned Ancient Joker was an unreliable investment trader on the account of the fact that it only works 1/4 of the time? Well, say hello to its dog coin crypto gambling brother, the Idol, which chooses one card out of your deck and makes all copies of that card double the multiplier when it's scored. In theory, if your deck is all one card, this is easily one of the best cards in the game, but in practice, you will never achieve this. At best, you'll probably end up with about 10 different cards, giving you a 1 in 10 chance that this card will be useful for a single round. Only an absolute degenerate of a gambler or a psychopath with main character syndrome would actually take this card, which is why I didn't hesitate to buy it immediately. I carried this card for half the game and had it managed to trigger twice with a deck that was made up of about 20 or so tens of spades. Both times it happened, I could have easily beaten the stake without it, and my deck would have lasted much longer had I taken any other joker over it. But the 2 times it did trigger were the most euphoric moments of my life. This was the best run I had ever had, and I will never hesitate to take the Idol again. After you spend some time going through each of the decks, if you're looking for something to break up the pace of standard gameplay, there are of course challenges. I can't speak for all of them as I've only done a few, but the ones I have done left quite the impression. And from what I've heard, they only get more interesting as you unlock them. As always, I am thankful that I never had the patience to go through most of these, as I can only imagine the destruction I would have caused attempting a jokerless run. All in all though, this game is more than worth the hours I lost playing it when I should have been working on more videos. The next review is already in the works, and I promise it will be coming much sooner and be twice as entertaining. I appreciate all of you who made it to the end, and I'm working hard to bring you even more in the future. Thank you all for watching, and subscribe for more unhinged ramblings. Have a good one.